It began on the still early morning of July 16, 2010. In the quiet of Pico Truncado, the calm was shattered by a discovery that would ripple through a family, a community, and a nation. A dog walker came upon something unusual in the grass. No one knew it then, but what lay in that field would become one of Argentina's most controversial true crime cases. The body was found there, motionless, silent, mercilessly taken. The victim was Johana Casas, just 19 years old. Once a promising young model and local beauty queen, she was now a lifeless figure in morning light. 2 bullets had struck her, one in the chest, one in the heart, and had ended her life before most of the town woke up. What followed would be an investigation marked by conflict, confusion, love, betrayal, and conflicting verdicts. But before the world would witness the legal tumult to come, the story began long before that morning. It began with family, with history, with the fragile threads of relationships that would later pull apart. Johana and her twin sister, Edith Johana Casas, came into the world within minutes of each other on July 19, 1990, in Pico Truncado, a small town in the northern reaches of Argentina's Santa Cruz province. Named for a nearby plateau, Pico Truncado was a place of oil fields and windswept plains, a place where everyone knew everyone else, and secrets were hard to keep. Their parents were Marcelina del Armen Orellana and Valentin Casas, a local police officer. Though the marriage ended in separation, Valentin remained a presence in his daughters' lives. The twins were striking, identical in features, nearly indistinguishable in appearance. Their mother often joked that she once changed the same baby's diaper twice, mistaking one for the other. They shared not only a face, but a connection that their family described as almost instinctive. When Edith was once badly injured as a child and lay in a coma for days, she awoke and asked only for Johana. Her father later relayed that Johana, then miles away, had felt an inexplicable tug, as though her twin was calling her name. They grew up together, but as teenagers, their personalities diverged. Johana became outgoing, vivacious, drawn to social life and attention. She was the sort of young woman whose presence lit up the room, whose laughter carried, whose confidence was unmistakable. She had an interest in fashion and beauty that led her to local modeling gigs, and she traveled to larger cities such as Bahia Blanca for shows. At one point she was crowned Beauty Queen of Pico Truncado, a title that marked her as someone with promise and presence. Edith, by contrast, was quieter and more reserved. She preferred calm spaces and smaller circles, and her thoughtful temperament contrasted with her sister's brightness. Yet they remained close, a pair bound not only by blood but by shared memories and deep understanding. The first shift in this dynamic came in the mid-2000s, when Johana was just 15 years old. It was at a bingo hall in town that she met Victor Cingolani, a local man in his early 20s. He was known around town as charming, self-assured, and socially adept. While Johana accompanied her father and brother that day, Victor sat at a nearby table with his mother and a friend. He later claimed that their eyes met repeatedly and that he was struck by her beauty. In his spare time, he worked long hours at an oil company, socialized with friends, and cultivated a reputation as something of a ladies' man. He often told others he had been with scores of women. Whatever the truth of his boasting, the connection with Johana was enough for him to pursue her. He said she had made the first move, approaching him and handing him a slip of paper with her name and number. He sent her a text message, and their communication began. Over the next months, they went out together several times, and soon became a couple. Her mother, Marcelina, accepted the relationship despite their age difference, preferring this steady attachment to the unpredictable alternatives she feared for her daughter. For roughly a year and a half, Johana and Victor were together, but as time passed, those close to Johana noticed signs of aggression in Victor's behavior. He was possessive, quick to anger, and tense when his control was challenged. There was one incident in which Victor attempted to strike Johana in anger, but instead shattered a window and injured his own hand. The couple eventually ended their relationship, But in a twist that would later carry weight in the public's imagination, Victor then began dating Johana's twin sister Edith. Victor later claimed that his feelings for Edith developed only after his romantic involvement with Johana had ended. When Johana and Victor were still together, Edith had been seeing another young man, and the four of them occasionally socialized together. There were even times when Victor invited Johana out, and Edith came along simply because she was alone at home. Edith's quieter personality was appealing to Victor, and though she was just as beautiful as her sister, her calm demeanor stood in contrast to Johana's spirited presence. Eventually, Johana gave her blessing for the two to explore their own relationship, believing they were adults capable of making their own decisions. But as anyone close to the family later reflected, the emotional bonds and jealousies worn throughout these transitions made the dynamic between the sisters more fragile than ever. In time, even Edith and Victor's relationship came to an end. Victor went on to see other women, and the sisters pursued their lives apart from him. Johana, in particular, entered a new relationship, this time with a man named Marcos Diaz. The Diaz family carried its own cloud of rumors, including allegations that one of Marcos's brothers had committed a grave crime against his own child. Whether grounded in truth or gossip, those rumors contributed to the sense of unease some felt about Marcos. He was described by those who knew him as jealous and controlling. He sent Johana frequent messages and was reportedly reluctant to let her go out by herself. Despite the warning signs, Johana and Marcos's relationship progressed quickly. After only 6 months, they moved in together, a pace that many in their circle found alarming. Meanwhile, the emotional landscape between Johana, Edith, and Victor continued to fluctuate. Victor confessed to Edith that he had never truly moved on from Johana, reopening old wounds and dynamics between the sisters. This back and forth of relationships, attachments, and ruptures would later be seen as a backdrop to a tragedy that unfolded with shocking abruptness. The last days of Johana's life were not marked by peace. On July 15, 2010, just days before her 20th birthday, she and Marcos went out to a party. They stayed until the early morning hours, and witnesses reported seeing them leave together around 3 a.m. Number indication of danger. No sign of fear. Hours later, a local resident walking his dog would make a discovery that sent shockwaves through the community. Johana's body lay in a field roughly 3 miles from the town center, in an area known as the cordon forestal, the forested belt that edged the town's emptiness. It was here, under the first gray light of the morning, that her life ended. The autopsy would reveal that Johana had been shot at close range, the fatal bullet striking her in the heart and piercing between ribs. The scene was chillingly quiet, and forensic teams noted the absence of any signs of a prolonged struggle or resistance. Within hours of the discovery, law enforcement moved with urgency. Given Johana's personal connections, 2 men emerged immediately as persons of interest: her partner at the time, Marcos Diaz, and her former boyfriend, Victor Singolani. Investigators theorized that the killing might have been planned, that if Johana intended to end her relationship with Marcos, then someone might have decided that if she could not be with him, she would not be with anyone. But this theory was still tentative. Marcos was the last person known to have been seen with Johana the night before her death, yet he was released less than a week after his initial detention due to insufficient evidence tying him directly to the murder. Investigators struggled to connect him to the scene with the certainty required for formal charges. In the meantime, a crucial piece of forensic evidence was discovered at the crime scene: DNA on a discarded cigarette butt. As technology allowed for analysis, this evidence later helped link Marcos to the vicinity of the killing, leading authorities to issue a warrant for his capture. By that point, he had fled, initiating a months-long search that ended only when he was placed in pre-trial detention more than half a year later. All the while, Victor Singolani remained in custody, formally charged with Johana's murder. From the beginning, Victor insisted on his innocence, asserting that on the morning of July 16th, he had been at a casino and then at a friend's home until early dawn. even his incarceration did not break his connection with the Casas family entirely. According to sources present during his first night in prison, he asked for a phone so he could call Edith to tell her he was innocent, and that he longed to see her again. Initially, she hung up upon recognizing his voice, only later changing her number. In an emotionally charged move, Victor requested to be taken to a hospital for a headache, and on the way saw Edith walking hand in hand with another man, a sight that suggested their intense relationship had ended. Edith later spoke openly about her grief and inner turmoil after the loss of her twin sister, revealing that she felt ignored and overwhelmed by emotion during this period. But her testimony would later play a central role in the prosecution's case. In mid-2012, the trial against Victor Cingolani began. Prosecutors built their case around three key elements. The first was a paraffin test performed on Victor's hands shortly after his arrest, which detected the presence of gunpowder residue, something prosecutors argued suggested recent firearm handling. Second was testimony related to tracking dogs that supposedly placed him at or near the crime scene. Third, Victor's alibi was shown to have gaps and inconsistencies, making his claims of innocence less convincing to the prosecution. The defense immediately challenged these lines of evidence. They pointed to serious investigative errors, including mishandling of evidence by inexperienced officers. Critics highlighted the unreliability of the paraffin test, noting that it was conducted without expert oversight and that the officer responsible had not used gloves, creating the risk of contamination. In one troubling moment, he even used his teeth to cut adhesive tape intended to collect residue, a breach of basic forensic protocol. Despite these challenges, the results were presented in court, and expert witnesses testified that Victor had the highest concentration of gunpowder residue on his right hand, a detail the prosecution emphasized heavily. Victor's defense offered a plausible explanation that he had recently been inside his brother-in-law's truck, which was frequently used for hunting, and could have easily transferred gunpowder traces onto his hands without him firing a weapon. Johana's father recounted past incidents of violent behavior and alleged threats made by Victor toward his daughter. A nearby resident testified that she had seen no signs of a struggle at the scene and emphasized a delayed police response. Perhaps the most striking testimony came from Edith herself. Edith Johana Casas attended every day of the trial, her presence a silent testament to grief and determination. She wore a T-shirt demanding justice for her twin sister. On the stand, she spoke of the abuse she and Johana had allegedly endured at Victor's hands. She recounted coercion into intimate situations and a pattern of intimidation. She described Victor as controlling, manipulative, and ultimately dangerous. Her testimony painted a picture of someone who, in her eyes, could have been capable of murder. The prosecution leaned heavily on her statements to strengthen their narrative. Victor's defense remained steadfast, emphasizing that no conclusive evidence placed him at the crime scene at the time of Johana's death. They challenged the paraffin test and the reliability of the dog's tracking. They underscored inconsistencies in witness testimonies and procedural errors in evidence handling. Despite these challenges, the trial concluded on June 27, 2012. Victor Cingolani was sentenced to 13 years in prison for simple homicide. The courtroom reaction was mixed. For some, justice had been served. For others, doubt lingered like a shadow. Even after the verdict, the story was far from over. In a shocking twist, Edith Johana Casas resumed a relationship with Victor. The announcement stunned the town and drew worldwide media attention. Her reconciliation with the man convicted of killing her twin sister sparked heated debate and disbelief. Over time, Edith publicly declared that she believed Victor to be innocent. She argued that the true perpetrator was likely Marcos Diaz, who remained in pre-trial detention awaiting trial. Regarding her testimony during Victor's trial, Edith later stated that she had been pressured by her parents to implicate him. She sided with the defense on critical points, questioning the paraffin test's validity and the reliability of investigative procedures. The officer who conducted the test had ignored safety protocols, and there were no expert witnesses to verify the methodology. Even the dog tracking evidence was questionable. Human scent can linger for days or even weeks, making the results less definitive. Victor, meanwhile, used his time in prison productively. He took up carpentry, building furniture, and art, a skill that offered focus and purpose. He and Edith lived with Claudia, Victor's sister, and together sold chairs, tables, magazine racks, portraits, and paintings he made. Eventually, Victor purchased a pair of rings and proposed to Edith, who accepted. The engagement further inflamed public opinion, particularly Johana and Edith's parents. For Marcelina Dellerman, it was like losing her daughter a second time. The woman who had once been so vibrant and outspoken seemed to vanish behind the walls of her sister-in-law's home. She became almost a ghost in her own life, a silent observer to events she could not control. Paranoia and fear weighed heavily, with Marcelina convinced that Edith was being manipulated. The family filed a legal injunction to prevent the marriage, citing concerns about Edith's mental state and safety. The wedding, originally scheduled for December 5, 2012, was delayed. Despite legal hurdles, Edith displayed no signs of dysfunction that would prevent her from marrying. On February 14, 2013, she and Victor tied the knot. The world watched in disbelief. A woman had married the man convicted of murdering her twin sister, a story that dominated headlines across Argentina and beyond. Journalists from Germany, the USA, and other countries descended on Pico Truncado. Major media outlets, such as the BBC and the Daily Mail, covered the wedding. Even offers from Playboy magazine and the TV show Dancing for a Dream were extended to Edith, all of which she declined. On the wedding day, security was tight. Chaos erupted as the prison transport arrived, with crowds throwing punches, stones, eggs, and tomatoes at authorities. The registry's doors and the vehicle were damaged in the melee, making front-page news. Despite the unrest, Edith and Victor declared their love publicly and spoke of starting a family together. The legal battle over Johana's murder was far from complete. On June 4, 2013, the trial of Marcos Diaz began. Initially charged as an accessory, Marcos was soon accused of being the actual perpetrator. Court documents described him as violent, controlling, and obsessive. He had a history of harassing girlfriends and involvement in armed confrontations. His actions the day after Johana's death suggested consciousness of guilt. He stopped communicating with Johana immediately after her murder, a stark contrast to previous behavior. DNA evidence collected from a cigarette and a music CD near Johana's body became central to the prosecution's case. During the trial, Edith tearfully accused Marcos of murdering her sister. Johana Casas, the twins' father, described Marcos as dangerous and cult-like, often involved in local disturbances. Marcelina testified that Marcos had never allowed Johana to be alone, monitoring her movements obsessively. The prosecution argued that Marcos acted alone at the scene of Johana's death. On July 2, 2013, Marcos Diaz was sentenced to 12 years in prison for Johana's homicide. At this point, two individuals had been convicted for the same crime in different trials. Marcos protested his conviction, asserting his innocence and claiming the lack of proper investigation. Edith expressed relief that justice had been served for her sister, while her parents remained deeply conflicted. Victor's lawyer immediately sought his release, citing the evidence that now implicated Marcos as the sole perpetrator. On December 5, 2013, the Higher Court of Justice ordered Victor's release due to insufficient evidence. He requested compensation of $75,000 for wrongful imprisonment, but received nothing. Marcelina eventually reconciled with the outcome, recognizing that Victor was not responsible for Johana's murder. The marriage between Edith and Victor lasted several years, but by 2021 they had separated. Edith moved on with a new partner and expected her first child, while Victor rebuilt his life with another woman. After decades of complex romantic entanglements, violence, legal battles, and public scrutiny, the case of Johana Casas appeared to reach a conclusion. Yet, even today, debates persist. Many continue to question whether Victor was truly innocent or whether he somehow escaped accountability. The story of Johana Casas remains one of Argentina's most sensational and controversial true crime cases. Her life and her tragic death continue to resonate in Pico Truncado and far beyond. The twists of love, jealousy, violence, and justice form a narrative that is as gripping as it is heartbreaking. If you found this case compelling, consider subscribing for more deep dives into high-profile crime stories. Until next time, stay vigilant and question everything.